Hey, everybody, and welcome to our Restore Her podcast. I am your host, Cheryl Lacey Donovan, and we are thrilled to have you with us on the broadcast today. We are expecting to do a Restore Her Virtual Summit beginning March 1st through March 7th, 2020. And we have some amazing presenters that are lined up to participate with us in that virtual event. So what we've decided to do is to invite our presenters to our podcast so that they can talk to you a little bit about what they'll be speaking on for the presentation, as well as what their role is with regards to the virtual summit and what they do in their professional lives. So today we have the amazing Alyssa Wilds with us. She's going to be one of our presenters for the virtual summit. Hey, Alyssa.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing well. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of the podcast as well as a part of the virtual summit.
Yes, thank you so very much for having me. It is truly an honor. Truly an honor.
Absolutely. So listen, let's go ahead and jump right in. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
My name is Alyssa Wilds. I am, my day job is I'm a parent advocate for Camden City School District and my childhood, my native town of Camden, New Jersey. I also own two companies. One is called the People's Champion. It's an advocacy group providing a voice for those without, championing their causes. Also, I have a speaking company, Wilds Worldwide, where I do blogging and podcasting and speaking engagements, training, writing, grant writing, those type things. So that's who I am, and I'm affiliated with and a member of St. John's Church Ministries in Camden, New Jersey, under the leadership of Pastor Bert and Danielle Wright, where I am such a proud member of, and I am also the outreach coordinator for my church.
Listen, you sound like most of us women out here that have all of these different hats that we wear, and that's one of the reasons why Restore Her is so important, because one of the tenets that we put out there is how important it is for us to make sure that we take time for ourselves, because, you know, we give and we give and we give and we go and we make sure everybody is doing well and we make sure everybody has everything that they need. And sometimes we forget to do that for ourselves. And when that happens, we end up pouring from what I like to call an empty vessel, and you can't do that. If it's empty, there's nothing else to pour out. And it becomes bitterness, and it becomes anger, and it becomes, there's a whole lot of other things that are not proactive and effective, and it sort of takes us back a few steps from where we've already placed ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And don't forget resentment, because resentment will creep in and on you too, where you begin to resent everything that you're doing because of it.
And it's so funny that we do that, because it's nobody else's fault but ours.
It really is not. It's not a sad thing. Like, oh, my God, I did this to myself, and now I'm mad at the world.
So listen, tell us a little bit about what you are planning to present when you participate in the Virtual Women's Conference.
Well, I will speak on March 6th, and my topic is relationships. So I'm just going to talk about relationships and how relationships and different things that have happened to me, just a real live, transparent moment. Going back to 2014, relationships were huge in my life at the time. At the time, my father was dying of dementia. He was in end-stage dementia. I was the only child of his five that was responsible for his care. And what had happened was I was running a nonprofit organization at the time. I'm a single parent. And at the time I had my oldest child was in college, and I can remember all of my titles began to flush out who I really was. So me being a boss and a daughter and a mom and all of these different, and a caregiver, it kind of flushed out me being Alyssa. And what had happened was I began to resent all of the relationships in my life. And it brought me back down to my knees by the end of the year when my father passed in October 2014, it was a real heartbreaking but eye-opening situation for me. It brought me to a point where I had to then take care of myself and begin to heal and love on myself so that I could begin to put back all of these relationships that had meant the world to me before my father's passing. I began to resent my siblings because I was the youngest of us all. They had more time with my father. I felt like he had given more to them only for me to have this huge responsibility of his care. And all of my relationships began to flash before me because as I was in such huge roles with being a boss, running a nonprofit, and being the mother of one child away in North Carolina. We're from New Jersey, but one child was in North Carolina. The other one was still young and was at home with me. And then trying to keep up with my siblings and have these virtual meetings and conference calls to try to keep abreast of all the things that was going on with my father. Everything started to flash before my eyes, and resentment, as we spoke about a little earlier, resentment became the order of the day all of the time. I was just angry with everybody because I had lost myself in the midst of all that I was charged to do. And again, just as we spoke about earlier, I think that I had taken on too much, and there may have even been a little bit of dependency and codependency and even a little bit of control. I wanted all of these things, but then it began to be too much for me, but I didn't want to sit anything down. And then everything came into play, and relationships were skewed, and we were all just having such a hard time. Not only were we losing our father, but we were losing our relationships in the midst of it all.
Wow. And that is so amazing. You know, I've heard so many stories similar to that one, including, you know, in my own family, because my mother is one of 7. And for the majority of my life, my grandmother, who passed away in 1995, she was 100 years old when she passed away. And for the majority of my life at that point, she had always lived with us. I think she may have not lived with us maybe for a year, maybe a year and a half in all of that time. And it was same thing. I would see my mother run back and forth and try to take care of her and try to make sure that she had everything that she needed and, you know, get groceries and, you know, just all of that. And after a while, you know, as I got older, I ended up filling in that gap as well. You know, and it was like, well, Mom, this isn't fair. You have 6 other siblings that are running around here that some of which don't really have a full-time job like you do. And you know, and you're the only one that seems to get the fact that she needs to be taken care of, or that there are things that need to be done for her. And even though my grandmother was for most of those years was able to do a lot of things for herself, obviously as she got older, there came a time when she was not able to do as many things for herself. And my mother was just heartbroken because she felt like she was doing all of these things, you know, for her, and nobody, I mean, even monetary-wise, you know, okay, so you say you can't come and take care of her physically. Okay, I get that. Can you help pay for somebody to come and at least with her a couple of hours a day? So it's interesting how those relationships pan out, particularly when you're talking about, you know, when you mentioned the fact that you were the youngest. My mother was next to the youngest. There was only one other child younger than her. And, you know, you would think that the relationship, the sibling relationship and the parental relationship would be very similar because everybody grew up in the same home, and yet it's not. It's totally different for each child in that family.
Absolutely. And that's just being honest, because my brothers, who didn't have a favorable relationship with my father was absent. Father was a really good father, though, but he was absent. And my brothers resented him, and that's just being honest. They resented him for the treatment of our mother. Daddy's girls, we held tight to him. So there's 3 girls, 2 boys. Daddy's girls kind of clung to him and, you know, was really going through the grieving process. Our brothers, though, were kind of grieving our grieving, if that's such a thing, if you can understand what I'm saying. Like they were hurt that we were hurt. Not that he was passing, but because we were going through such a rough time, it was hurting them to see us go through such a rough time. So they were not really interested in even being a part of this whole process. So you had to take the 2 off the table, but then the other 2 girls lived in Virginia, and me and my father were here. So it was just rough, and just relationships. I'm thinking, like, why is this not as important to everybody as it is to me? And why, with me having a child all the way away that I'm paying for in college, why is it, in fact, that I'm holding up all of this? And they definitely did kick in. When they could come to New Jersey, they could, but the everyday responsibility was, in fact, mine. It was, and it became so heavy as other responsibilities. You know, there would be good times at work, but then there's high times because there's state reporting, and then there's Office of Licensing and different things that you have to do. You're trying to get accredited. You're trying to do a bunch of different things to take your business to the next level. And then your father is passing, so that's always on your heart and on your mind, and it's starting to weigh you down a little bit. You know, you're not moving as fast as you once did, and it was just heavy. It was heavy, and in the end, I can just recall all of us kind of just sitting around looking at each other like, what's next? You know, how do we begin to heal? How do we get back to the unit that we grew up as now that Daddy is gone? Because Daddy was absent when we were growing up. So now that he's absent, like he's now with God, how is it that we repair this? Because how did somebody that was absent for most of our lives impact us so heavily to make us who we are, make us who we now are, and how do we get back to who we once were? And it was so heavy. 2014 was just that year of extreme heaviness and then healing and trying to move forward.
So, you know, I can imagine that at that point, those relationships have become somewhat toxic.
Yes. And that's being honest. That is being honest. And are we really ready for those, even in 2020 now? Are we ready to have those real conversations? Are we still ready? Because we did have some preliminary conversations, but with the grieving process and with people's feelings being so tender, I think we kind of walked away from it a little bit. And then we would try to get back together, and then we would walk away, and we would get back together because it became kind of toxic to a fault. It really did.
Wow. And I think that the key to that just is what you said, and that's having those tough conversations, those hard conversations. And in most relationships, whether they are sibling relationships or marital relationships or parent-child relationships, it's always those hard conversations where, you know, as the Bible puts it, you need to tell the truth in love. Those can be very difficult to have because if the other person is not at a level of maturity to receive that, it can create additional issues. It can create more problems than it can help sometimes because they're not ready to hear what needs to be said. And you pray about that. I'm sure, you know, that at some point they get to a level of spiritual maturity where they understand that what is being told to them is something that's being told to them out of love in order to help and to heal. But that's not always the way that it's received.
Absolutely, and that is absolutely correct. And when I think about the scripture that says, "Love thy neighbor as we love ourselves," and how it was so difficult to love on each other when we were so broken. Like even if I pour my love onto you, my love is so broken that I can't possibly. I'm not loving myself really good right now because I'm so traumatized and I'm so broken. So how is it that I can love on you? And even when we tried to pour our love out onto each other, it was so broken that it just began to break us up even more. And it was just so hard just trying to mend the relationships because we all had our own point of view that was valid. It was valid, you know, because your feelings are, in fact, your feelings, and we have to honor your feelings and what it is that you've gone through and what your perspective on your relationship with Dad was. You know, how differently we felt about each other, how Daddy treated this one this way and how Daddy treated that one that way. And it was just so hard because their healing had not come to us. So for us to try to pour into each other and heal each other, it just could not, in fact, happen. It was just a hard feat.
And, you know, that is always so amazing to me how people can be in the same experience and yet perceive it so differently. You know, like you said, you felt like I'm the youngest, and perhaps they had gotten more opportunity to you know, be with your dad and experience your dad and all of that. And I'm sure they felt the total opposite.
And absolutely right. That is absolutely correct because they were like, oh, Lissy was Daddy's favorite. Oh, Daddy gave you everything. And from my vantage point, I'm like, Angie is Daddy's favorite. Absolutely no doubt. And then, of course, there's somebody else who's like, oh, his namesake, Lil AC, is Daddy's favorite. So we were always bouncing around like, no, well, I think up until about 94, Angie was Daddy's favorite. And it was like we could pick apart times like, oh, Daddy was really a lot closer. I was just closer in proximity because I was actually there on the scene. But I didn't feel like I was that person, like Daddy's favorite. And because those narratives bounced around quite a little bit, it got hard, even for that.
So that's why when you're dealing with relationships, it's so important for you not to just. Sometimes it's just important for you to sit back and listen. We want to be heard. We want everybody to understand what our point of view is and what our perception is about a particular situation. But it's just as important to sit back and listen, because you find out so much. And if you really, really want to make change and really want to create a better relationship with the other individual, you have to get to a place where you can see their point of view, or where you can at least understand where they're coming from. And if you're not willing to do that, then the relationship will probably always be fractured, because the way that people act on the outside, the way that they sometimes even the facades that they put up, the things that they say, it always comes from somewhere. And many times, as you alluded to earlier, it usually comes from some broken place or some hidden place in their heart that nobody else knows or nobody else really understands, because they haven't taken out the time to sit back and listen. They've talked on it, spoken about it, but listening.
Amen, amen, amen. Yes, 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 because we're forgetting that effective communication also requires good listening. You have to be able to listen. You have to hear what it is that I'm saying. You don't have to agree, but please hear me out. You can't just listen to respond. You need to listen to understand and listen to hear exactly what my mouth and my heart is saying. And in just our brokenness and our hurt and our grief. And keeping in mind that Daddy is the only one of us that's no longer here. Our family has been totally intact, 5 adult children, 2 parents, all up until 2014. So this is our first loss, and we had no clue how to handle it, on top of all of these mixed feelings with the loss of Daddy, because nobody was willing to really have conversations about it, to be perfectly honest. Like, what happens? He's slipping away. What happens now? How are you feeling? And for me, I felt like I was in a better situation because I was able to grieve the loss of my father the whole time. So at the funeral, I had already grieved for a year straight. It was already hard for me because I'm watching my dad change. I'm watching this profound, we used to always call him the philosophizer. He was full of philosophies, and, he's such a tall, handsome, dark man, always dressed up all of the time, always on a pair of hard bottoms. So you go to seeing your dad, who is so profound and so tall and so proud and such a proud, wild man. His last name meant the world to him. He came from just royalty in his mind, like his people. He was just a proud person. And to go to my dad not even being in his right mind, to going to see him and his undergarments are on the outside of his clothes, or his hair is just so disheveled, and you can see that that he's just not with us at this particular time. To see my dad go from this person who I can go to for advice about anything, that I could go to, and he knew what my heart was. He would always tell me, he could tell by my skin how I was feeling. He could tell if I was in distress. He knew who I was. To go from that person that I could go to and just lay my head down and Daddy just tell me exactly what I'm feeling, to somebody that's talking about I don't even know, and you just crying because you can't even believe that it has come to this. So being able to grieve the whole entire time, by the time we got to the funeral, I was pretty much okay. Like while my siblings were really just beginning this whole process to see him in the casket, Daddy had been gone for a long time to me. So we were all in different stages of our grieving. We were all in different headspaces, and we were all traumatized in a different type of way, so we didn't even know how to begin the process of healing so we could get back to the relationship, the closeness that we once had.
And That is an amazing testimony, amazing story. I think that it will definitely help other people. The biggest takeaway to me from all of this is the ability to sit and not just talk, but to also sit and listen. And I like to say listen to the person's heart. Don't just listen to the words on the surface that they're saying, but listen to their heart. Mm-hmm. Try to have empathy for where they're coming from, despite what you may believe and perceive. Understand that they're telling you what their perception is, what their mm-hmm. belief is, how they understood that particular experience took place. And I think if we sat down and we did that, we really could build, closer and better relationships. And it takes a lot of maturity to get to that place, because
Absolutely.
Not everybody is able to do that, on the interim, because it's hard. Like you said, it's difficult to sit and really hear some things when you've already set up in your mind what you think the reality is, and in fact, that was not necessarily the case. So I think that you're talking about relationships and perhaps getting people into the right headset of how to deal with relationships, and if necessary, how to cut off toxic relationships. But sometimes we do have to detox our relationships as well.
Yes.
We're good about detoxing our bodies and sometimes detoxing our minds and things like that. But every now and then you have to detox relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit, well, not a little bit, but just tell our listeners the name or the topic that you'll be expounding upon when you do the virtual summit?
Relationships. I will be talking about relationships. That's my topic, is relationships. I have been given this topic, and I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about this forum. I'm so excited about all things that are happening. So relationships, we're going to just expound upon relationships and just mm-hmm. what relationships matters the most, what relationships mm-hmm. that we can actually walk away from, because it's different for everybody. For me, the greatest relationship with me is my relationship with God, because mm-hmm. it was I needed to come back to one. I needed to get outside of Alyssa trying to move on her own strength, realizing that I couldn't do anything without God, because I had come to my knees. I had lost a parent. I had lost my strength. I had lost, even in the midst of my father dying, I had lost my relationship that I was in, because I had too much weight. It was too many things, and some things I just couldn't shake off. I still needed to work, so I needed to run this facility. I still needed to be my children's parent, and I still needed to be a daughter to my father. I had to be his caregiver. I was responsible for him. And the weight of all of those things meant that I was starting to neglect some of my responsibilities, and my relationship had gone at that particular time. My boyfriend at the time, my mate, and that was, losing him was a lot, because he was a sounding board for me. But I was realizing that I was pouring so much on him, and I was giving nothing back, because I had nothing to give. I didn't have any more to give after my whole day of mother, boss, daughter. I just couldn't. There was nothing more that I could give. And I know that it was hard for him to walk away at such a time, but he deserved better at the time. So just talking about relationships, because I needed God. I needed God to get me through that. I'm losing my homie. I'm losing my daddy. I'm losing him, and I'm losing a lot of different things in the process. And I just had to get back to one. I needed God. I needed to call out to God in the most or not eloquent type way. I just needed to talk. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't. My words weren't flowing. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't poetic or prose or any of those kind of things. It was just like, God, I need you. I need to call you in, like, right now. And I apologize that I've ever even stepped away thinking that I could do all of this on my own. God, I need you. I need you right now, because it's crashing and it's burning, and I can't do this without you. So the number one relationship is with my God. I had to get back to one to be able to even carry on in such a heavy time, just to be able to then, for God to guide me, to give me the words to say at times, for God to guide me, to show me how to love again, for God to guide me, to show me what relationships were important and what relationships needed to be set down and I never need to go back to. So I needed God just for direction in the midst of such a tumultuous time.
And, I always say that there are two relationships that are of the utmost importance. And until you get those two relationships together, you will not be able to have relationships with anyone else. That includes your family, that includes your friends, that includes your job, no one else. And those two relationships, the first one you've already said, that's the one with God. And the second most important relationship that you will ever have is your relationship with yourself.
With yourself, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. It has been great speaking with you. Why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know how they can connect with you?
You can connect with me. I have a virtual podcast. I'm on Facebook, Alyssa Wilds, and I also have Facebook page Wilds Worldwide, WILDS WORLDY WIDE. Wilds Worldwide, I have a page. My email address is wilds.alyssa@gmail.com. I am available for speaking engagements, all of those different things. Also, I am the People's Champion, and I champion causes wherever people need me to champion causes. Again, we are an advocacy group that goes in and champion causes. We do work with immigration. We do work with parents trying to get their children back, juvenile justice. We do whatever it is that people need us to do. We will go in and we will handle it right for you or walk you through the process. So my number is 856-357-3303. You can reach out to me at any given time. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter. My name is Listen to Me, LYSSN2ME. So please reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, Wilds Worldwide. I will, in fact, connect with you immediately. And I thank you so much for this opportunity. I really, really, really do. And I just want the world to know before I go that Shirley C. Donovan has been amazing. I was blessed to be a part of her first mentoring group. And I'm telling you, if ever you're offered this opportunity, you need to jump on it. She is absolutely amazing. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, once again for joining me, and thank you so much for your kind words. Everybody, this is the Restore Her podcast. Don't forget that we have the virtual summit that's coming up March 1st through March 7th of 2020. Hopefully you'll be able to join us for this amazing event with all of these awesome speakers that are going to be presenting some information based on the 7 pillars of the Restore Her movement. You don't want to miss it. And as always, remember that God can do exceedingly and abundantly more than you could ever ask or think, according to the power that works in you. Be blessed.
Thank you.